If I could rename this show, I would call it American Idol. And it's because we fearlessly attack the idols that are destroying America. Idolatry is out of control. Cam Newton, the former NFL star, is an idol. He said something incredibly stupid. So stupid that we have to address it today because it gets at the core foundational issues we try to address on this show every day. The regime, the people trying to undermine American values, have installed athletes, unthinking athletes, unserious people at the top of the culture as the key influencers of the zeitgeist. They've done it because these athletes don't know any better but to promote immorality, to promote values that undermine the very fabric of this country. They don't know what they don't know. But thankfully, Fearless, the American Idol version of Fearless, is here. We'll get into it today. Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I'm Jason Whitlock, your host. Thank you for joining me. Happy Monday. We have an awesome show planned for you today. Delano Squires, Shemeka Michelle will be here. They'll help me unpack this conversation about Cam Newton and the responsibilities of being a father. Later on in the show, I'll get into a discussion. I'm going to defend, and you have to stick around to hear this, I'm going to defend Sheryl Swoopes. Sheryl Swoopes, the former WNBA star who continues to take little tiny pot shots at Caitlin Clark. I'm going to defend that Sheryl Swoopes. You don't want to miss that. You also don't want to miss the extra Fearless content on blazetv. Go to blazetv.com/fearless. Use the promo code Fearless, and you can save $20 on your yearly subscription. Before we bring Delano into the conversation, I want to give you the background to understand this conversation about Cam Newton. I want to play this clip of Cam Newton. And I believe this is on Cam's podcast. He's brought on a Dr. Shanae Bryant, I believe is her name. Maybe I'll get a correct pronunciation. But Dr. Bryant, female, attractive. She's having a conversation with Cam Newton about Cam Newton being an irresponsible father. Cam's got 8 kids, 3 different baby mamas. And she politely walks him through the silliness, the unseriousness, the irresponsible nature of Cam's philosophy as it relates to fathering children with women he has no intention of marrying. Let's play the clip.
So I'm not married, right? I have beautiful children.
How many?
8.
I didn't do my research. I thought it was 4, but 8. Okay.
No, baby.
Cool.
It's
by how
8.
many women?
3. And this is the kicker. I want more. Now.
By multiple women? What's the intent of just saying about your wife?
I just want God to bring them.
Oh, okay. And you have, so you just.
Because my point is this. My desire to get married is lower than my fear of divorce. So, as you would say it, Dr. Brian, you said it, I didn't say it, I will agree. I'm just taking my time.
You're not taking your time.
I am, though.
You're being very action-based. You're not taking your time. You're being very action-based.
I'm taking my time.
You're being very action-based. You have 8 kids with 3 different women.
Yes.
You are creating, procreating, and multiplying. That is not taking your time. You're being very selectively active, okay? So you're creating, in disclaimer, the kids are innocent, they are beautiful and amazing. Anything I say has nothing to do with them babies, because I can't wait to be a mom, and I love the kids, period. But you are proactively choosing where you want to be active at and where you want to take your time. You want to take your time in having a wife because of your own fears. But you will, and I say this with all respect and love, what I'm about to say next, okay, Cam? But you will selfishly create broken families, even if you're in their life and you're a proactive father, and I believe you're an amazing daddy. I can only imagine with just your presence and knowing you thus far, but these families are still broken. Every child cannot have Papa in the house with them. So some child, if not all, will end up with some kind of deficit without Daddy being there. Now, you chose to do that. I'm not saying you sat there and woke up one morning and said, I want to be selfish today, so I'm going to go make a baby. Not saying that at all. But those are selfish acts at the expense of your fear. So at what point do you feel the fear, do it anyways? And yeah, that is a low functioning behavior. To say that I am going to create these homes. Let me go better. I'm gonna build these houses and put kids and these beautiful women and kids in them, but I ain't gonna create a home in them. I'm gonna wait till I dissipate my fear to find a wife where I'm still gonna be fearful with, because there's no such thing as not having some type of nerve or some type of feeling behind marrying somebody who you're spending your life with. And then I'm gonna build a home with her while all these other beautiful babies have houses. That's completely unfair and it's selfish.
Just tell me when I can solve.
Yeah, almost. That's completely unfair and that's selfish. And so, yes, you're taking your time in this department, but you're not taking your time in this department, which means you're compartmentalizing. And compartmentalizing never works. Compartmentalizing hurts everybody involved. Everybody who's in this box and that box and this box and that box and this box. And then here you go over here trying to figure out what box you're gonna feed or entertain or do. Then you're looking outside to figure out who's your next victim to put in the box.
So the young woman did a nice job. She did the best that she could. I'm not trying to diminish her. I think it's great that she stood her ground and pushed back against Cam Newton in that conversation. But there's an easier summary of what Cam Newton is doing. He's acknowledging, I have a fear of divorce. So basically what he's saying is, I don't want to get damaged in a divorce. So I'm going to avoid marriage because I can't conquer that fear that I might get damaged in a divorce. What he's not doing, and he's the adult in this situation, what he's not doing is saying, man, I could create children and they could get damaged inside of this broken home that I'm purposely creating. This is cowardly behavior. And cowardice is at the heart of what he's doing and what he's talking about. How do I know? Because I used to be a coward. And I same mentality, this fear of divorce and, oh my God, I could get hurt. I could do this or that could happen to me. And so that's how you sit here. Now, again, I wasn't the kind of idiot that Cam is, but I certainly let fear control my behavior. And that's how you get to be age 57, knowing you should be a father and you're not a father. Knowing that you should have created a family, but you didn't create a family because of fear. I'm still dealing with this fear. Oh my God, I could get hurt. Cam Newton not giving any thought that looking at the statistics, looking at all of the data, all of the information that says kids in homes where the parents aren't married, they are more likely to get involved with criminal activity, drug use, lower academic performance, less likely to graduate from high school, less likely to make the honor roll, less likely to achieve. There's all of this information. So he'll put a child in harm's way to protect himself from getting hurt. This is the ultimate cowardice. This is what's wrong with men. We've become too selfish. This is our version of abortion. You have women that are sitting there, man, boy, this could really hurt my career. Let me kill this baby. You have men, oh, I could really get hurt here. I could get financially damaged. I could get embarrassed. Let me not create a family. Let me not marry this woman and be a leader in the home. Let me protect myself rather than do what's right. This is at the heart of everything we're trying to do here with Fearless, the kind of conversations we promote. I can't think of anybody better to have this discussion with than Delano. He's at the Heritage Foundation and his work here. The breakdown of the Black family and just the family in general in America is rooted in the mentality that Cam Newton is expressing. Men controlled by fear. A society controlled by fear. That's how you get churches shutting down because there's a bad version of the flu called COVID. Fear. The Bible repeatedly says, do not fear. But men are acknowledging fear controls me. And then men like myself, not acknowledging it, but our actions tell us that I'm acknowledging, like, oh man, I'm afraid to do that. Fear is controlling me. Some of you, I'm sure already in the chat, oh, here goes Whitlock, blasted another Black athlete. I'm blasting another man who's being a coward, and I'm copping to the fact that mentality, that type of cowardice lives in me. And we have to root it out if we want to advance this society, if we actually want to do right by young people and by children. Before we bring Delano in, I want to talk with you guys about our passion. Imagine if you had the ability to just wave your hand and abortion would no longer be legal. Imagine all the lives you could save in that moment. Tragically, that's not the reality we live in right now. But the good news is you can save unborn lives by donating to Preborn. The Ministry of Preborn empowers young expectant mothers in crisis to choose life. Preborn has rescued hundreds of thousands of babies' lives through ultrasound. When a woman considering abortion visits a preborn center, she gets to hear her baby's heartbeat and meet that precious child on ultrasound, and it's a divine encounter. The majority of the time, she will choose life for her baby. I'm proud, I'm pleased to be affiliated with the organization that's not only working to save lives, but is succeeding. We can't shut abortions down overnight, but we can work together to change the hearts and minds of expectant mothers by introducing them for the first time to the young life that's growing inside of them. Will you help rescue babies' lives? To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or give the way I prefer to give, preborn.com/fearless. Preborn.com/fearless. Let's roll out to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, bring in Delano Squires. Delano tweeted about this Cam Newton conversation over the weekend. The tweet went viral. Delano, we'll start with just my take that at the root of this, what Cam is talking about is cowardice, being controlled by fear, protecting himself rather than thinking about protecting the children that he's creating. I just can't. His conversation with her, I couldn't see a more clear-cut example of like, this is the mindset that is poisonous to the family structure and the restoration of the family in America.
Yeah, Jason, I think fear is definitely a part of it. And I see a lot of, so-called red pill accounts, guys who, talk about these issues and say, well, because women have more political, social, economic power and influence than ever before, marriage and family are a bad deal for us. So we should just not be a part of it, right? But or we should have kids but not get married because we could lose everything in divorce. And as you're right, it is a sign of cowardice. In many respects, the red pill, quote unquote, right is the mirror image of the pink-haired feminist left, because each party tells its troops that, family life is bad, marriage is a bad deal, children, can be a burden. Obviously, that's not what Cam is saying. He says he wants more kids. But what they do is continue this long sort of tradition of separating marriage from family and parenting and marriage from child rearing. And I do think fear is a big part of that. But it's not the only part. And I certainly would sort of like to unpack some of the other things that I think are at play here.
Start unpacking.
So this conversation was fascinating to me because, one, it dispels the notion that this is about a lack of resources, right? I don't know Cam Newton's family tree. I guarantee you, if his great-great-great-grandfather was a garbage man or worked on a plantation somewhere in the deep South, that it would not cross his mind to have a bunch of children by a bunch of women, none of whom he's married to, right? So this is not about resources, whether it's Cam, Dak Prescott, Zion Williamson, Trayvon Diggs, and any athlete you want to talk about. This is not a matter of resources. But, and you sort of mentioned my work, Jason, and I looked at this Cam issue, particularly as I'm writing this book on marriage and the Black family. And I really do think, as I'm doing my research, there are 6 groups that really have helped to destroy the family structure, particularly in Black America. You have paternalists, and when I use that term, I'm talking about people who believe in big government, because these are the people that displace the role and function of the man in the household. So instead of having a husband and father providing for a wife and children, you can have big government. You have feminists who really did a number on not just men, but more so on women, because feminists hate femininity. They resent masculinity and say that it's toxic. They think children are a burden that need to be overcome, hence abortion. They think marriage is an oppressive structure of the patriarchy, and they think the home is a prison. And their whole goal is to free women from the home. So you got paternalists, you got feminists, you have abortionists who hate children and think that it's better to kill them, particularly if a mom is poor, and certainly if she's poor and Black. That's 3. You have pride activists who changed the definition of marriage legally, got it legally changed. They weren't the first to change. Right? No-fault divorce probably was one of the first major changes, but pride activist says marriage can be 2 men or 2 women. And we didn't even get into the fact that eventually, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, they're going to say it can be 3 men or 2 women and a man. So you have paternalists, feminists, abortionists, pride activists, and the last 2 groups, you have anti-racists, and this is specific to the Black family. Because these are people who say that all of the problems in the Black community can be solved by completely eliminating white supremacy. Think your Ibram Kendis, your Ta-Nehisi Coateses, your Nicole Hannah-Joneses. So what that does, that says, Black folk, you don't have responsibility for the things that are going on in your own community. The key solution to the problems you're facing is the white people who we believe are oppressing us. And then the last group, and I believe this goes to something that we were talking about, are functional atheists. And this group includes not just the spiritual but not religious camp, but also many self-identified Christians who don't believe in taking moral stances on anything having to do with individual sexual desire or anything having to do with marriage and family.
That's quite the list. Is there one group that deserves more rebuke than the other?
It's 2. There's 2 groups. The way I characterize it as I'm writing, I'm still writing. The way I characterize it is some of these are foundational threats. The paternalists and the feminists recreate the family structure. Because the feminists say, I don't want a real man because patriarchy is bad and it needs to be smashed. But I'm willing to take the man in the sort of guise of Uncle Sam. He can be my man. He can provide me clothing and food and shelter and protection. He can provide for me. So they trade real, particularly biblical patriarchy for bureaucratic patriarchy. And those 2, I think, are the first 2 that really set this in motion in terms of undermining the family structure itself. Now, those are foundational sort of issues. The other ones oftentimes are sort of supportive structure issues, right? Now, if I bash in a wall in your house, the house itself is going to be damaged, obviously. Or let's say I break out the window or put a hole in the wall, it's not going to collapse. But if you leave that unattended and you don't fix it, then you're going to have some serious issues. So I think if there are two that I had to call out for a particular type of rebuke, it would be those two, because those are the two that displaced the roles and functions of the husband and wife. And those are the two who have been at it the longest, and I would say the better part of 60 plus years.
What do you make of Cam choosing to have this conversation with this woman? He would argue, hey, I'm having a conversation, I'm provoking conversation, and I allowed her to rebuke me and push back. Is this a healthy thing that he chose this particular person to have this conversation? Part of me was like, hey, she did a nice job, but Cam's father's a minister. Mm-hmm. Cam was raised in a house with a biblical worldview. Cam knows, in my view, he needs to be sitting down with men who are challenging his thoughts, not an attractive woman who did a nice job with her cleavage out, keeping his attention or whatever, not trying to diminish her. But I wish he would go play tackle football in the Olympics of intellectual competition rather than playing flag football. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Clearly, her style of dress was meant to provoke some sort of reaction, whether Cam or the audience. I do agree with you. I think this is a conversation that's better had between men. I also agree in terms of Cam having the right type of influence. And obviously, I'm presuming this because nobody knows what goes on in a household other than the people who are actually in it. But just based on what we know publicly, he had the right type of model. And I will say this, Jason, it's important to recognize that, because what that shows is that you can lose it in a generation. As much as we talk about issues around the family, and I'm talking specifically around the Black family, and how you have multiple generations of single parenthood, father absence, father abandonment. It's also the case that many parents who try to give their kids the right model feel utterly powerless because their kids go and do what the world, so quote unquote, is doing. But I do think this is a conversation that should be had among men. The problem is many of the men who feel inclined to have it do not have the moral authority to speak those words to Cam Newton, right? It's sort of like when I hear Uncle Luke, the rapper Luke, chastising Donald Trump on things that he said about women. You may agree with what Luke is saying, but Luke is not the person to deliver that message. So a guy, a former NBA player who has, let's think a Sean Kemp, a Larry Johnson, a Travis Henry. I'm talking major league. I'm talking Hall of Fame numbers, 11 by 10, 7 by 6. He may feel like, yeah, man, Cam is out of pocket. He can't say anything. A minister, Jason, I'll give you a perfect example of somebody who I can see wanting to have this conversation with Cam Newton. A different Dr. Bryant, right? Jamal Bryant. Jamal Bryant may say, hey, I'm in Atlanta. Cam's my man, right? I support him. Let's sit down, brother. Let's talk about what it means to be a husband and a father. What is he gonna say, right? He can't say anything remotely critical about Cam Newton, because Cam's gonna turn around and say, but didn't you cheat on your wife? Didn't you allegedly get one of your church members pregnant? That's why you had to run from Baltimore down to Atlanta. Aren't you shacking up with a woman who is a pastor of cardiology or whatever nonsense you got at your church, and y'all are planning to get married? So how can you chastise me, pastor, when you haven't shown the model that you're preaching to me now? So I think it's one of those things that has to happen. I think a Tony Dungy could have this conversation. I think a Benjamin Watson could have this conversation with Cam. I think a Chris Broussard could have this conversation with Cam. I think that Denzel Washington could have this conversation with Cam. But many of the people just don't have the authority to have it. And I think it's unfortunate because it's a conversation that needs to be had.
So you rattled off a list. I would put Delano on that list, because what I would say is, who's this woman? I had never heard of her. So you don't need some massive following. You need some expertise in the field. And it's not that, I think your following is bigger than hers. So he could have this conversation with you. The major problem, I think, and not everybody on this list does that apply, but to some degree it does apply in terms of we've been trained in this modern society that as black men, we shouldn't disagree, not publicly. We should not in any way, oh my God, that guy's made money and he's famous. Don't disagree with them. Any disagreement you have with them, because everybody loves to say, man, why don't you just call Dion and talk to him privately? Like Dion's sitting around waiting on me to call him. And it's like, oh, Jason, I've been waiting on you to call. I got a free hour. Let's debate about it. Or let me come on your, that's not what Dion's looking for. And that's not what, and again, a lot of men have been trained to, oh God, I don't play tackle football. I only play touch football. I don't want to be anywhere publicly disagreeing with someone who may challenge me in any way. And so I just think we've gotten into the habit of and have been normalized that unless we're coming together to tell each other how great we are at the BET Awards or some other award show, we don't publicly wrestle with each other. And it's a mistake. We need to publicly wrestle with each other. And so I could, people you routed off on that list, many of them may have no interest in publicly disagreeing with Cam Newton about anything. And that's a mistake.
So I would add a couple things, right, to put a finer point on the point you just made. I agree with it in whole, right, where disagreeing is taken as hating. And that's the term. In the same way, discussing or debating has been transformed over decades into platforming. So no, I can't talk to someone who doesn't share my agrees because I'm quote unquote platforming them. I do think there are a couple of exceptions to this rule. One, we don't mind publicly debating, disagreeing, and outright attacking people if it's the right topic and the right person speaking. If there's criticism of Angel Reese, that's taken as, that's negative, that's hating, you're hating on a black woman, we should be protecting her. If there is vicious criticism, public criticism of Candace Owens, that's okay. If there's criticism of Sexy Red for her lyrics and what she presents to the world in terms of music and culture, oh, you shouldn't do that, that's respectability politics, so on and so forth. If it's criticism of Sexy Red because she says, yo, I like Donald Trump, he put some money in my pocket back in 2020, that's okay, we can attack her for that. So I think it depends on the issue that's being discussed. I also, to your point, I think, having it be Cam, having it be a man who's making this mistake makes it easier to criticize. If this was a male doctor and therapist who was talking to a woman, again, let's use Sexy Red, who's had multiple children and has never been married, this would come off totally different. And even some of the guys who I saw quote tweeting me would be a lot less likely to do that if what they would be doing, in effect, is criticizing a woman for her lack of sexual discipline and her poor decision making as it relates to the men she lets impregnate her. But because it's Cam, and people say he's a dude, and men can take criticism, they should be able to take criticism, I think there's space to have that discussion. So I think, Jason, I could see Ryan Clark pushing back on Cam if he was on his podcast. I could, and I could see Ryan Clark making a case for marriage. He's not going to make the case. He's not going to address it the same way you would, or maybe even I would. But I could see them because I saw a lot of people dunking on Cam and saying, "Man, he got her. She read him the riot act," and I saw a lot of encouragement of her in doing so. Last thing I'll say real quick. I posted another clip. This one didn't go do nearly, as much sort of circulation, of Dr. Bryant talking to Nick Cannon about why she had been engaged 4 times and never married. And I said, First thing it made me think, she certainly likes to have conversations with a certain type of guy. This is what the old folks will call people with familiar spirits, right? So I'm talking about guys who clearly don't want to commit to a woman, and maybe it's because she finds it hard to commit to a man. And in that respect, she is just as afraid of what her life might be like for different reasons. Is he going to trap me? Is he going to oppress me? Is he going to say, I got to take his last name? Is he going to keep me from dressing sexy in public? Is he going to keep me from, being an entrepreneur? But there's something to be said for the American culture in general, where we devalued marriage, devalued the home, devalued children, and then wonder why our society looks the way it looks right now.
I apologize for this because your Ryan Clark point I found so fascinating that I spent all my time thinking that through. and I think there's some substance there in terms of, on the Pivot podcast, would Ryan Clark have figured out a way to say, hey man, I think you're wrong about this, X, Y, and Z? I think you're right. But I also think Ryan Clark would be trapped to the same degree that Dan Orlovsky was talking about. He's trapped by his employer, that he could only go so far because there's a lot of feminists in power at ESPN. The feminist mindset and culture is empowered at ESPN, and he can only go so far. And that's why, again, so he would dance around it and try. No different than the way this woman did, in terms of she found a very polite way of saying, Cam, you're wrong here. And everybody loves that. Oh, she found, that, and that's what, but it's not as effective. Because trust me, and you're raising kids, and I'm just speculating here. Sometimes you have to raise your voice to your kids, and you might have to pat them on the back of the rear end to make your real point. Because if you unpack it very nicely and politely in one ear and out the other, they don't take you seriously. And what Cam Newton was saying was like, hey man, literally what I would have said was, hey man, that shit is crazy and it's dangerous. What you're talking about, you're putting kids' lives, and so no one's gonna unpack it that way. And so they're going to unpack it a very nice, polite, and hey, we're all going to be best friends and let's go out and have a drink afterwards. And you know what? We may have that drink at the strip club together and we'll talk about it further there at the strip club. Literally, that's, and it doesn't make the point as directly as what it needed to be done. We're looking at Black children in total free fall, particularly young Black boys, and you have a father who's got wealth, had two parents, had a father that raised him in the church, and he's sitting there casually, my desire to get married is lower than my fear of divorce, and these kids set up in little separate houses where I visit and spend some time there. Yeah, that's good enough for them because I need to be protected. It's poison, and it needs to be called out as that. And we are so, because I'm going to get into this later in the show when I talk about Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, not to blow that conversation or preview it too, but we've been moved in a place where authentic, direct conversation just isn't allowed. And people actually see it as some negative. And it's not. To me, it diminishes the Bible and how direct it is, and how, Jesus wasn't sitting around going, well, let me see if I can unpack this in the most non-damaging way possible. And, I spent a lot of time, I'm rambling, but I spent a lot of time this weekend looking at Matthew 10, 34, 35, 36, and just thinking about RFK Jr. actually. And just how this man has just taken this bold step, irritated his wife, irritated his sister and his family, and said, you know what? Hey, I think this is what God wants me to do. I have this one shot here to help kids with chronic illnesses, and this is what God wants me to do. And if my wife and family ain't on board with it, I got to answer to God. And I literally I thought about Matthew 10. It's like, hey man, this guy is basically saying, I'm coming with the sword, and I'm gonna set son against father, daughter against mother, families against each other. And I'm sitting there like, that's why I'm inspired by RFK. It's like, this is what we need from men, to sit there and say, you know what? I got to answer to God. And it's just not this pretty, everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya thing. It's not. And so I've rambled on. I want to give you a final thought before I move on to Shemeka, and you can respond to that or any other last points you want to make, Delano.
Yeah, a couple quick points in terms of Cam and his thought process that, I provide for my kids. I say this all the time. Kids need presence, ENCE, a lot more than they need presence, ENTS. So no amount of money is going to make up for the fact that it's impossible for him to live in the same household with all his children. And this not only affects them emotionally, socially, it also affects another conversation that is very popular in the Black community when it comes to wealth creation. Now, Cam has a lot of money, but that also means that if he's on child support, he's paying a lot of it, which is one of the ways that a lot of athletes go broke. Because if you're a man and you have, let's just say you have 5 kids by 4 women in 4 different households and you don't live with any of them, that means you're on the hook to support 5 different households. It doesn't matter how long your money is. You can't possibly divide it in that way and then think you're going to accumulate enough of it to pass on generational wealth. So that's one quick point. Second point, I actually disagree with you in terms of the communication. And I think you, as an expert in this field, would know this, right? Because the point of communication is to have your message received. Now, again, I wasn't a journalism major, but even as an engineer, when I was taking classes, like computer logic and other classes like that, we would sometimes send messages, and you send a message and then the person on the other side has to acknowledge that it's received. There are ways in which you can speak to a person that it doesn't matter if the content is correct, the delivery just makes it completely unappealing. Now, part of that is determined by who you're talking to, what your relationship with them is, and a number of other factors. What the setting is. There are ways in which a person can take a private rebuke that it'll be a lot less likely than if you do it in front of other people where it feels like you're embarrassing them. But I think there's a way in which, the message does matter, the messenger matters, tone matters. I think people overblow tone, right? And they tone police, the only type of law enforcement that the left likes. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter at all. So I think that, a guy like Cam, and even you brought up me as a dad. Yes, there are ways in which I will deliver a message, and sometimes the Board of Education does need to meet the seat of understanding. But that's not the only way that I interact with my kids, and it's certainly not how I interact with my wife. Now, a lot of people, Christian and non-Christian, like to use the term submission. That can have 2 different connotations. That can have the connotation of a woman willfully yielding her desires to that of her husband. Or it can have the connotation of a man putting his wife in a hole that's so tight that she has to tap out. One of those is going to produce better outcomes in your household than the other. And I think that that's something that sort of goes to how we communicate. Last point I'll make is this. You brought up ESPN and his employer. There's only 2 ways that this type of conversation with Cam could violate the unwritten rules of ESPN. One is if it's spun into a stereotypical sort of public discussion on the absent deadbeat Black father, right? I'm thinking Lester Munson's Where's Daddy cover on Sports Illustrated circa 1998 with the little black boy with the basketball and saying, where's Daddy? And he goes through a laundry list of athletes with paternity issues, Larry Johnson, Elijah Wan, Patrick Ewing, Sean Kemp. Now, you're throwing Larry Bird there just from, make sure you can say, well, I mentioned a white guy. But the list was overwhelmingly African-American athletes. If it becomes that, ESPN is not going to want to touch that. Stephen A. Smith They're not going to want to have that conversation publicly. The other way is the minute somebody says, well, what about all these women that Cam is having these babies by? What is their responsibility? If you meet a guy and he got 7 kids by 6 different women and he says, he wants to date you, well, why don't you run away? Why would you entertain him? This is the future conversation, right? If it moves from Cam's responsibility as a man, solely his, not as an archetype of the black man or the black athlete, if it moves from that to a conversation about women and what they desire and their sexual decision making, ESPN will shut that down. They won't want any part of that conversation because people have no problem with men being publicly rebuked and chastised for not being responsible, right? For not being protectors and not being providers. The minute you ask women to take accountability for any decision that they make, and I see this because I watch a lot of dating shows for research purposes, then everybody starts to get very uncomfortable. And I think that's when you would get, the feminists would come in. The feminists have no interest in defending Cam Newton because he's just another man that can be flogged publicly. They do have an interest in defending Cam Newton's baby mamas because they need to be protected at all costs.
Thank you, D. Great job
Jason.
as always. We got to keep it moving. There's nothing better at the end of a long day than sitting down in your favorite easy chair with a glass of your favorite whiskey. And hey, if it turns out that with every glass, you're helping to support a great American cause, doesn't taste much better than that. It's time to chart your own course with Flying Ace whiskeys from Craft Co. Inspired by generations of American aviators and proudly made right here in the United States, Flying Ace is not only making amazing whiskeys, they're also committed to supporting our brave troops and their families through their partnership with Folds of Honor. They're providing scholarships to families of America's fallen or disabled, and these scholarships allow families to begin to chart their own new course after experiencing great sacrifice. Flying Ace whiskeys are American proud because they're American made, and they're American proud because they're helping to support our heroes and their families. Don't wait around. Today's the day to get your own and see what all the fuss is about. Buy online at flyingacesspirits.com. Use the promo code America to get free shipping. That's Flying Aces, there's an S at the end of ACE, spirits.com, promo code America for free shipping. Shemeka Michelle, next. Welcome back to Beef. As I walk you through my top 50 media beefs of all time. Yeah, I'm an equal opportunity beefer. It's like, Randy, are you asleep at the wheel? Big lips are in style. I'd love to squash this beef. I mean, I was not real happy at all. I was less than thrilled. I was displeased. And now we have beef. All right, welcome back. I want to get a woman's perspective on the conversation we've been having about Cam Newton. Shemeka Michelle, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
What do you make of Cam Newton's conversation with Shanae Bryant, Dr. Shanae Bryant? Did she do a good job, a good enough job of rebuking Cam? Your thoughts?
Well, Jason, let me say as a certified life coach that if this was an actual session, coaching session or therapy session, I would hope that she would have dug a bit deeper to see exactly why Cam said what he said or why he feels the way that he does. Because I think so many times we overlook that when we're talking to people. And so for those that needed that little baby food, I just wanted to put that out there. That were some pureed pear, and I hope it tastes good. Now, because this was a podcast and it's for entertainment, I think she did a good job getting her point across without being disrespectful. But that part was missing for me. I have to say that. But I think she did a good job without being disrespectful. It was viral, what they expected it to be when they put it out there. And I think it was to actually make her known or make her famous. That's why he had her on there. And I do think she was dressed a certain way to get that attention, because, who would really put that out there if you didn't feel, if Cam was really trying to get help, he wouldn't put that out there. It wouldn't be public. This would be something he would be trying to get to the bottom of in private. And like you said with Delano, I think this would be something he would sit down with men to discuss and really be trying to look for mentors to move past this type of thinking. But I think it was what it was for, entertainment.
I think it was for entertainment, and I think it was a first date. I think they were both. This was like a live episode of Tinder, and who knows who swiped right and who swiped left at the end of that. And I'm on both people's part. I felt like this is a first date.
Yeah, I agree, because again, I just didn't see her really trying to get to the root of the problem or why he felt the way that he did. And truthfully, there are going to be women lining up. Although he already has 8 kids and he said that he doesn't want to be married, there are going to be women lining up to give her a baby, and give him a baby, and she may be one of them. She says she doesn't have children. So why? Why at this age have you not been married and have children? So I think it was an audition, and I think she spoke to him as someone who was auditioning and didn't want to step on any eggshells. And it just didn't come across real genuine to me. It didn't come across very authentic, simply because she rebuked him, but she didn't really offer him any type of solution or to try and get to the root of the problem. There's a reason why this man feels this way. And as someone who has children, let me just be a bit transparent and say it's common sense that if you have children spread all over the place, you cannot give those kids 100% of you. It does not matter how much money Cam has. It does not matter what he's able to give them financially. They will be missing a portion of their father because they're spread all over the place. Just to give a bit of, my business, because it goes over so well. When I married my ex-husband some 20-something years ago, he didn't have children. We had kids, we raised them, but unfortunately, we divorced. Since then, he's had 2 more children with 2 different women. And there was just a conflict between, our kids and him recently, because our kids have, felt like his attention has been taken away from them financially and emotionally because he has these other children. And that is just a fact that no one can avoid. When you don't have kids in the same home and you're not living in the same home with them, you spread yourself thin. And that's just a fact, no matter how much people want to dress it up and act like that's not the case. That's the truth. Even with someone as, my kids share me as a mom. It's even hard for me to parent them as individuals, and they share me simply because each child has a different need. They need me to show up a different way. As mom, I have to deal with them being different. It's hard. And so for you to have 8, and, many of them are in different places, it's difficult. And I wish people would just start telling the truth and stop acting like, oh, well, Cam's a millionaire and that's going to make it easy. And it doesn't make it easy. Yes, they may not want for anything financially, but I can tell you that is not what kids care about the most. Of course, they need things. Of course, you want to be able to provide the things that they need and the things that they want. But what kids want more than anything is you. Now, the baby mamas, on the other hand, they might want their, some pocketbooks and some shoes and whatever. But those kids want that person, and you just can't spread yourself thin like that.
And what you just unpacked as well, Shemeka, is your youngest now, I think, is 19 years old. And
Yes.
Your oldest is 26, 27.
28.
And so 28, yeah. This goes on into adulthood. It's not just when they're kids. You got these divided agendas and stresses pulling on you. Your daughters are now adults and they still want attention from daddy. And if daddy's got these two other younger kids, he's got so many different things pulling on him that their needs aren't getting met on into an adulthood. And again, because what every man really wants to do proper is marry his daughter off and make her some other man's problem, bottom line, or let him handle that. And until that process is complete, they still need daddy. And even after they get married, they still gonna need daddy. And if he's getting pulled in a million different directions, it's just impossible. And so that conversation, and then the other thing I was, as I sat there and listened to Cam, and I want more kids. And I'm just like, I wonder if women are hearing this. I know they're hearing it improperly. I wonder if they're hearing it properly. Let's say Cam has $100 million in the bank. Let's say he does. But you got 3 homes and your own home you're maintaining now. You add another baby mama, that's probably another $200,000 to $400,000 to $500,000 a year going into that pot. You got maybe $1 million going. You got 3 or 4 babies with one woman. You may have $2 million going into that pot. It's so I could see women sitting there saying, you know what? Yeah, I'll have Cam's baby. That gives me a salary of $500,000 a year for 18 years. That's a good deal. In this economy, there'll be some people saying, like, that's a good deal. $500,000, I just take care of a baby for 18 years. Sign me up, Cam. Come on over.
That's Bidenomics. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He's signing up for more and more trouble. And finally, Shemeka, I think if I had to, Delano may have slightly disagreed with me or pushed back a little. No, he didn't disagree with me, but I see it as just cowardice on Cam's part, this whole I fear divorce. But you don't fear putting children in a less than ideal situation in a less than ideal family situation. I consider that the ultimate cowardice. I'll put kids in harm's way while protecting myself. That's cowardice.
Yeah, and I think what it is too is just being selfish, because when you have children, it is an ultimate sacrifice. And of course, this would be the same way, in marriage. But what I wish more of these men would do, if you're scared about being, taken to court and all of your funds being taken, that's why people do prenups. Make sure you have an ironclad prenup in going into this marriage, and just commit to a woman and see what happens. All of this whole, I would rather have a child than have a marriage. Having children is a huge responsibility. And the idea that it's less responsible than marrying someone and committing to them is crazy. Having children and parenting them is the greatest sacrifice I have ever made in my entire life. And so I think people need to actually be more responsible and realize that when you decide that, that's the greatest decision you will ever make, and it should come with the greatest sacrifice, because as you just said, it doesn't stop. I hear so many men, that have been paying child support say, I can't wait until they turn 18. 18 means nothing except they're now adults with adult problems, and they still need to be parented. They're still going to come to you for advice. They're still going to come to you for guidance, and they still need you to be available in some form or fashion. Now, if you've done a good job, they're going to go out here and they're going to be well-raised, productive citizens, and they will be fine. But that doesn't mean that they won't turn around and look back to you and have questions and still want want to be parented. I am 49 years old and I still need father figures in my life because there are times when I just can't figure it out. And I need someone that I know that's not trying to get in my pants to give me some life advice and push me in the right direction so it doesn't end. And I want people to stop acting as if having kids is just, no big deal. And I can just sow my seed anywhere and everywhere. And, that's less hard than getting married. It's not. It really isn't. If you're going to be a dedicated parent, it's not less hard and it shouldn't be less fearful. It should be more fearful because these are people that you want to make sure turn out the right way and not embarrass you down the line. That's a great big deal.
Shemeka, thank you so much. Great job as always. We'll see you later this week. I got some breaking news for those of you watching the show, listening to the show. Fearless, we're going live starting September 9th, just 2 weeks from around the corner, 10 a.m. Central Time, only on YouTube and blazetv. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to defend Sheryl Swoopes, and I'm going to criticize Caitlin Clark next.
Of Jeopardy, Alex Trebek.
Thank you, Johnny Gilbert, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome everyone. We go into the Jeopardy round, and we'll find out what happens with these categories. Sports lingo.
Sports lingo, 600.
They're not telling us I only played one game because I cracked my kneecap in half, but that's neither here nor there.
A few moments later.
I averaged 1.5 points a game. I saw some article on social media. That's a lie. It was less. See that? You didn't know I was going to say that, did you? It was less than that. It's a lie. How about 0? Because I never played, because I cracked my kneecap in half.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
Oh man, do I have a curveball for you. I'm actually going to deliver some justice for TT. Sheryl Swoopes is TT, and I'm going to deliver some justice for Sheryl Swoopes. She's in the crosshairs again, the former WNBA star. She's been trolling, going after Caitlin Clark since Caitlin Clark's college days. It's gone on into Caitlin Clark's WNBA career. But in this instance, I'm going to sincerely defend Sheryl Swoopes. Buckle up, get ready. Sheryl Swoopes in some hot water because she was on a podcast, I think that's sponsored, promoted by the WNBA, and she started talking about the Indiana Fever's first game back after the Olympic break. They played the Seattle Storm. The Fever looked amazing. They were very efficient offensively. The Storm, good team, good winning record. Fever come out of the gate, look amazing. The Lexi Hole knocked down a bunch of three-pointers, scored 22 points. Kelsey Mitchell scored a bunch of points. Caitlin Clark had a great all-around game. Sheryl Swoopes talks about this game and what a great start the Fever got off to after the Olympic break, but she did not reference Caitlin Clark, and people are upset about it. Let's play Sheryl Swoopes omitting Caitlin Clark.
This Indiana team, I'm going to say shout out to Lexi Hull. I'm a big Lexi Hull fan.
Absolutely.
Watch her in AU. Lexi Hull shot the leather off the ball in their game against Seattle and just couldn't miss. Kelsey Mitchell is just stroking. She is just shooting the basketball. Aaliyah Boston, almost a triple-double. I know we're talking about teams where they can move and things changing, but if Indiana continues to play the way they're playing like this, they too are going to move up in the standings.
So that's Sheryl Swoopes, and everybody's acknowledging that, hey, look, she talked about the Indiana Fever, said a bunch of nice things, but somehow didn't manage to reference Caitlin Clark. I get why she didn't. I understand why she did it. And part of it is Sheryl Swoopes doesn't like Caitlin Clark. We'll enter that into the record. Not going to be in denial of that. Sheryl Swoopes has some jealousy, envy issues as it relates to Caitlin Clark. She's right in there with some of the other hating-ass Shaniquas that, are upset with Caitlin Clark. But that's not what's driving Sheryl Swoopes here, in my view. Sheryl Swoopes is recognizing that, hey, I can't say what I really think about Caitlin Clark in this moment, coming off that Seattle game, and just trying to talk about it. Because if I unpack the whole truth about what she really wants to say about Caitlin Clark, I'm going to get ripped for it as well. And so the only thing I can say about Caitlin Clark is, oh, Caitlin Clark's the greatest. Well, that's not what Sheryl Swoopes believes, and that's not her number one takeaway from that Seattle Storm game. That wasn't. And so she just left it out. You got nothing good to say, don't say anything at all. It was strategic. I'm not going to touch it because they can't handle the truth. Think of Jack Nicholson. Think of Tom Cruise and A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. And Sheryl Swoopes is right. People can't handle the truth about Caitlin Clark. There's no one on the planet who could argue that I have a problem with Caitlin Clark. I am a Caitlin Clark groupie homer. I hated the WNBA until the very moment Caitlin Clark showed up on the scene. And now I watch the WNBA 3-4 times a week. I watch it even when Caitlin Clark's not playing. And it's all because of Caitlin Clark. I'm a Caitlin Clark homer. Caitlin Clark this isn't gimmick, it's not shtick. She's my third favorite athlete of all time. Of all time. There have been 3 athletes that have absolutely captured my imagination in my 57 years on this planet. Magic Johnson was first, and I was a nut job. I used to keep my own stats off TV. Go back to the 1980s before, all the ESPN stats and everything was. I kept my own stats on Magic because, and particularly when he played the Celtics and Larry Bird, they're cheating Magic. I'm going to keep my own stats. They're not giving him his rebounds and assists, blah, blah, blah. I was a Magic Johnson nut job favorite athlete. Magic was then surpassed by Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods, me and my dad used to talk about Tiger Woods. The Tiger Woods thing just took over my life, and there was nothing that could come on television that was more important than Tiger Woods on a Saturday or Sunday, even in first Thursday, Friday rounds, whatever. I was a Tiger Woods nut job. Caitlin Clark, third athlete to ever do that, totally reworked my sports passion, my schedule around Caitlin Clark, making sure I can follow her. I love Caitlin Clark. I'm also no different than Magic Johnson and Tiger Woods. I will criticize Caitlin Clark. Because there's nothing that I love that I will not criticize. Nothing, including myself. I love myself more than virtually anything, and I'm critical of me. Listen to this show. Critical of Magic Johnson. When Magic Johnson transitioned into a television talk show host, Used to criticize him often. When Tiger Woods melted down in 2009 on Thanksgiving and could never mentally recover from that, had to criticize him. And I still love these guys. Magic as a basketball player, Tiger as a golfer, and Caitlin Clark. But we live in an era now where from social media to debate sports TV, everybody believes and behaves as if, oh my God, if you criticize someone, you hate them. Even if I put out 50 straight tweets that are nothing but supportive of Caitlin Clark, if I pivot once and say, hey, these turnovers that Caitlin Clark is at, they're a problem and need to be fixed. I'll start getting people tweeting, oh, you just hate Caitlin Clark. You're just doing that to please Caitlin Clark haters. No, I'm just talking about what I'm observing. Caitlin Clark's sloppy with the basketball and the turnovers are a problem. They're nearly as big a problem. Nearly, I didn't say he's the same, but they're nearly as big a problem as Angel Reese's inability to make simple layups. Angel Reese is shooting like 25-30% from 3 feet. It's a problem. Caitlin Clark and all of the turnovers, the sloppiness with the basketball, the nonchalant passes that are getting picked off, they're a problem. Empty possessions are a problem. I pointed this out over Twitter and I immediately got inundated with people taking shots at me. How dare you criticize Caitlin Clark? And so Sheryl Swoopes, I'm sure, watching the same thing as me. I watched that Seattle Storm game. Caitlin Clark played a solid game, 23 points, I think 9 assists, 5 rebounds, whatever. But she started out shooting poorly, and the turnover problem was still there. And then when you get to their game 2, when they played the Minnesota Lynx this weekend, the turnovers were a problem. And I know Minnesota's a great defensive team, but the 7 turnovers were a big part of the reason of taking the fever out of that game. And yes, they were blitzing her and double teaming her, and her teammates could help her out. But there's this myth out there that, oh my God, half of Caitlin Clark's turnovers are her teammates dropping passes. That's a lie. That's not the case. Caitlin Clark is sloppy with the basketball and turns it over too easy, and it's a problem that needs to be fixed and addressed. I can say that while loving Caitlin Clark. It's no different. Many of you love this show, but you may email me or tweet at me, hey, Whitlock, lose some weight. It's a problem. You're saying that out of love. Sheryl Swoopes can't talk about Caitlin Clark and say, I think what Caitlin Clark is doing is tremendous. I think that her impact on the game is unbelievable. I think she's Rookie of the Year. But if she doesn't clean up the sloppy turnovers, and if she doesn't improve her shot selection, she's not, and the Indiana Fever are not going to reach their full potential this year. And Sheryl Swoopes is 100% right that Lexi Hull's shooting and Kelsey Mitchell's shot making and the triple-double that Aaliyah Boston almost put together were the primary drivers in them winning that game over the Seattle Storm. It was not Caitlin Clark. And Caitlin Clark is Rookie of the Year. Caitlin Clark should be in the MVP conversation, in my opinion. Caitlin Clark is the reason I watch the WNBA. But Caitlin Clark, shot selections and turnover problems are troubling, and I just don't see them getting any better. The turnover thing seems to be getting worse. The shot selection is slightly improving. But the shot making, the logo 3 thing, needs to be kicked to the curb. She needs to take that shot maybe twice a game, 1.5 times a game. Let's start taking some 2s. Let's start taking some easier 3s. The logo 3, it's a nice little brand, but it's not contributing to winning. You can't have that conversation in this environment. Oh, you hate Caitlin Clark. So Sheryl Swoopes chose to say nothing because she can't say what she really thinks without being accused of being racist or an, Caitlin deranged critic. So she said nothing. And I'm going to defend Sheryl Swoopes. Stephen A. Smith, who doesn't watch the games, doesn't watch NBA games, doesn't watch WNBA games, doesn't know what he's talking about. He's like most people. He jumped on Sheryl Swoopes because he's trying to prove, hey, I'm not racist like Sheryl Swoopes. Let me beat up Sheryl Swoopes and take some pot shots at Sheryl Swoopes. Let's play Stephen A. Smith taking pot shots at Sheryl Swoopes.
So no, Caitlin Clark. Sheryl Swoopes. No, Caitlin Clark. Respectfully, Sheryl Swoopes, you have any idea how that makes you look? You have any idea how that serves to stain any kind of critique of Caitlin Clark, because that gives fodder to those who believe she's being hated on and ostracized to some degree? Do you realize that, Sheryl Swoopes, you're insane to do that? Let me tell you why you're insane to do that. Because Sheryl Swoopes, you're one of the greatest players ever in the history of basketball. That's why. See, you won a championship in college at Texas Tech. You won 3 Olympic gold medals. You won 4 WNBA championships. You know basketball. You know basketball better than me. You know basketball than any of the pundits. You know basketball better than most of the men that play basketball. There is no way in hell you just accidentally left Caitlin Clark's name out of that soliloquy that you dropped about the Indiana Fever. Stop it. You know that. Stop it.
When you don't watch the games and you don't know what you're talking about, that's what you yell at Sheryl Swoopes. And this whole social media climate, this whole media climate of no one needs to actually watch the games, no one needs to be informed, you just need to be loud and interesting. That's the standard. So Stephen A. Smith doesn't know what he's talking about. And so Sheryl Swoopes is upset. She, to some degree, now Sheryl Swoopes, I'm not saying all of her intentions are pure. She wants to be in this conversation. She's no different than Angel Reese, has piggybacked the Caitlin Clark momentum and ridden it into a level of relevancy that's undeserved. Sheryl Swoopes doing the exact same thing. But Sheryl has a leg to stand on here. She said nothing because you can't handle the truth. If she said what she really believes, no different, because again, no different. I'm a Caitlin Clark homer groupie. She's my 3rd favorite athlete of all time. Could go to number 1. I'm not joking. I'm not saying this for clout, stick, or whatever. You just don't go from watching no WNBA to watching a lot of WNBA and, oh, it's just a gimmick. It's just for clout. He's just chasing clicks. No. The woman has connected this word to me in a real way. It's unbelievable. I want to transition into applying the exact same argument to Angel Reese and what's the problem with American media and social media and what has been done. We can't have real conversations because someone needs to have a real conversation about the Chicago Sky, Angel Reese, Teresa Witherspoon, and Kennedy Carter and what they've set up in Chicago with the Chicago Sky, because it's fascinating. The unrepentant racism and ghettoness that is driving the Chicago Sky is fascinating. And no one's either paying attention or it's just outlawed. You can't talk about a group of black women being racist. That's not allowed to be discussed. Don't you realize Kamala Harris is going to be president of the United States, and these Yas queens and black women are going to save America, and so we can't talk about this example we're seeing in sports that where it's just crazy. The Chicago Sky had a shooting guard named Marina Mabry, white girl, very good, excellent, great shooter. And I think in their first game after the Olympic break, or it was either first or second game after the Olympic break, they played this Marina Mabry, who asked for a trade, had to get out of Chicago because the environment around Angel Reese, Teresa Witherspoon, the head coach, and Kennedy Carter, the shooting guard, the other guard that was competing with this Mabry when she was there, it's so toxic, she said, hey, get me out of here. Trade me. She got traded to the Connecticut Sun. They played the Chicago Sky, and Mabry put up 24 on them, knocked down 5 or 7 3-pointers, kicked their butt. I want to show you what happened during this game. First, we're going to start with a clip of Kennedy Carter trying to break the face of Marina Mabry during this game. Let's play that clip.
Your triple-double in the loss against Phoenix. Here's Mabry posting low. She's going to go to the free throw line on the foul by Carter. And you can see an obvious pain, Mabry, with the physicality that Carter presents in the front court. And the officials are going to the monitor to take a deeper look into this one as Mabry still on the floor being attended to by the training staff for the Connecticut Sun.
Mabry hits her with a pump fake and coming down hard is Kennedy Carter. That looks like it hurt. Mabry's tough, she'll be all right.
Been upgraded to a flagrant foul 1.
Can't be talked about. These are black queens. You can't criticize them. It'll get in the way of Kamala Harris being president. Can't talk about the black queen. This stuff is important. Well, Whitlock, quit talking about the WNBA. It's a waste of time. No, it's not. You can see what's going on in American culture through the lens of the WNBA. You want to worship black women. Get ready for this. When you have this kind of idolatry towards any group of people, whether they're black, gay, Jew, or whatever, this type of idolatry leads to thuggery and unhealthy behavior. When you set up any group as untouchable, can't talk about them, can't criticize them, it leads to chaos. It leads to corrupt, immoral behavior. And so you have a group of black women running around the WNBA. They're untouchable. Everybody has to Yas queen them. Everybody has to pretend like they're the greatest human beings that ever hit the planet. And so what do? Marina Mabry, and I know this is just one example, but if you go into the background, there's clips of them pregame where the Chicago Sky wouldn't acknowledge this Mabry in pregame warm-up, shoot-around, whatever, acknowledged a bunch of her other teammates on the Connecticut Sun, wouldn't acknowledge her. There's real animus. There's a little short clip of Angel Reese taunting during the game, taunting Marina Mabry. Same thing. Angel Reese, the same person that taunted Caitlin Clark. Oh, look. That's not the clip that I sent, because the clip I sent, you could see her clapping in the face. But anyway, she's turning around, clapping in her face, taunting this Marina Mabrey. It's the exact same thing that, just a shorter degree, that Angel Reese did to Caitlin Clark. This is racial idolatry. And this is what it foments. This is what it empowers. And no one is looking into these stories and talking about these stories because they just want to turn their head and act like it doesn't exist, that these women aren't out of control. Yes, they are out of control. Yes, they're out of control. And last point I'll make on this, because at some point I'll circle back to all of this. What Marina Mabrey saw, and again, this is when you set up a group of people, put them on a pedestal, and say, oh, that group of black people, they're Democrats, they're victims, they're special, can't say a word about them. Anything you say about them is racism. Oh, that group of people that like to bend over and take it up the rear end, that like to scissor, that they got a bat and balls but want to pretend that they're men, they're special, can't say anything about them. That's homophobia, that's transphobia, that's some sort of, all these different things. Can't do, oh, there's that group of people, their ancestors are from Israel, they're Jewish, you can't say anything about them, can't criticize them, nothing. Everything's a trope. It's anything you say about them, that's anti-Semitism. All these different little special groups that are untouchable. We're begging them, we're empowering them to act in an unethical way. It always works this. If they set it up, hey, fat black men, you can't say anything bad about them. You must worship them. You must treat them like they're a special group of people. And as screwed up as I am, you could multiply it by 20 or 30 if everybody had to walk around on eggshells and say, oh, look at that fat black man. He's a special human being. Anything you say against him is fat phobia. I would be a hot mess. We're creating hot mess by putting people in these little protected spaces and bubbles. And so I'm just going to circle up the point. I hope this isn't too big for you. I hope it's not too much for you. It's just the facts. It's just the truth. But Angel Reese and what the Chicago Sky are doing. Here's a woman that shoots like 30% from 3 feet, and they built their entire offense around feeding the ball to someone with an offensive package that's the worst package we've ever seen in the history of organized basketball. This woman shoots the ball from her shoulder, below eye level. So again, she shoots her release and all that. It's like a blind person. It's like Stevie Wonder and Gary Coleman combined on a basketball shot. And that's why her shot gets blocked relentlessly. That's why she's going to break some backboard with some of these shots. She's blind when she's shooting it, and she's shooting it from so low that anybody can block her shot. But they're building an offense around her and feeding her the ball. She shot the ball the other day, yesterday, I think 16 times, went forward 16 from the field. This is normal for her. And I'm sure Marina Mabrey started out this season playing with Chicago Sky and watching this and like, we're building the offense around feeding the ball to this person with clearly the worst offensive package we've ever seen in the history of basketball. This is madness. This is insanity. And why are we doing it? And she's like, deuces, I'm out. Let me get out of here. And they hate her for it. They hate her for bowing to truth and wanting some sense of normalcy and not wanting to be involved in the Angel Reese gimmick. Angel Reese is a terrific rebounder. This whole narrative that all she does is rebound or miss shots, that's a joke. That's not true. She's a terrific rebounder. But that's it. She's not some transcendent player. No one buys tickets. Hey, let's go watch someone rebound. They don't do that. Basketball's not about that. Her game is ugly. People don't want to see that. People want to see what Caitlin Clark and some of these other that I've discovered. There's some ballers in the WNBA that play a beautiful game of basketball. That's what they want to see. Not someone rebound the basketball. But we got to all go off into loony land because, hey, black women, black girl magic. And let's go off into loony land and they're special. And then we look up and see Kennedy Carter beating up Marina Mabrey and the Sky building an offense around some player that shoots the ball like a third grader. Remember, we're going live September 9th, 10 a.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Central Time, YouTube, blazetv. I hope that I haven't given you too much today, but I had to give it to you. Raw and uncut. We'll play tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow.
Waiting for the countdown, coming off the breakdown, standing in line for freedom. Looking for a breakout, feeling like a standoff, nothing in life like freedom. Came in like a fighter, striking like a ladder, making all these moves for freedom. I want freedom. No negotiation, my sister, no relation. We all just wanna have freedom. Sitting on a corner, never been alone. I'm breaking my back for freedom. Blessed, we are living, get back. We are receiving, all deceiving. We all wanna be free. We want freedom. I wanna be,